I think she's going to introduce.
Hi guys, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi guys, good afternoon. I just didn't know if you were awake yet or not. I'm awake. Here and mentally here. Okay. Thank you so much guys for being here, being on time, being ready to go, and spending your beautiful Sunday afternoon with us here. We have a great seminar planned for you today. We have some members from representing law-related careers here, and they have a great session planned for you. And by request, they've included an interactive breakout session, so you guys will be able to discuss and engage a little bit today with what they're presenting. I'm going to introduce Mr. Demchek. He is a member of our operating committee, and he has got some of his colleagues here with him today. But I think you're really going to like the seminar, so.
Welcome everybody to the Camp Legal Seminar. I am Mike Demchek, and I'm up here with Vivian Whalen Dufferin and Rob Dufferin. We're all lawyers, and we are happy to be here. We want this to be a very fun and informative hour and a half to be with you. We'll each introduce ourselves a little bit, and maybe I'll give you a brief outline of what we're going to cover today. But if you have any questions along the way, raise your hand, feel free to ask. We want to make this interactive and keep it interesting for you. Like I said, I'm Mike Demchek. I have been an attorney for over 35 years, born and raised here in Canton. In fact, I went to Gibbs School for 4 years, and I went to St. Peter's School. So I mention that because I know a lot of you would be familiar with those schools in Canton. I then went to St. Thomas Aquinas High School, decided I wanted to go to college. I went to Bowling Green State University. Wasn't sure what my career path was going to be, but I majored in business administration and specialized in economics, emphasized economics. About my junior year, I really wanted to go to law school. My grades were pretty good, and I ended up going to the University of Toledo, which is up the road from Bowling Green. After law school, I took the bar exam, and with a few twists and turns, ended up back here in Canton. And I've been in the practice of law, private practice, for the past, again, 35 years. So that's basically a brief background of myself and how I got here. The areas we want to cover are, the education. If you're interested in a legal career, what should you emphasize? Maybe when you're in high school or college. What's really required to get into law school? What are the best subjects to take? What's law school going to be like? And then what happens after law school? Bar exam. What opportunities are available? And so we want to cover all those things. Again, if you have any questions, just go ahead and raise your hand. I'll now let Vivian and Rob introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Vivian Dufferin. I use Whalen as my maiden name, so I use that a lot professionally. I've been a lawyer since 1993. I was born in Chicago, but I grew up in Akron. And I went to Catholic schools. I went to St. Hilary's up in Akron, Fairlawn area. And I went to Our Lady of the Elms High School, which is up in Akron, all-girls, small school. And I graduated from Ohio State University in Columbus in 1989 with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. And back at Ohio State at that time, you could take either the psychology with the BA or psychology with the BS. So I was leaning more towards the science field, actually. So I got my Bachelor of Science. I had no idea what I wanted to do, other than I was interested in the science field. So I graduated summer quarter of 1989, so I was 1 quarter late in graduating, so I couldn't start anything as far as law school right away because I graduated like the very end of August and I would have had to be already starting law school. So I took the LSAT, which is the law school entrance exam, my senior year at Ohio State, just as an idea that I thought maybe it might be something I might be good at and I might enjoy. And I figured I would see how I did, and I did pretty well actually. And my grades were pretty good also, but not great, not 4 point, but they were pretty good. So what I did then, I graduated from Ohio State, and I did the law school application process during that next year. And I worked at a law firm as basically like a gopher law clerk type, runner type person for that full year until I started law school in the following year. So I kind of took a year off, almost a full year off between college and starting my law school. And then I went to the University of Akron for law school. I graduated in 1993 and took the bar and passed it in November of '93. And I've been a criminal prosecutor for the beginning of my career doing felonies and misdemeanors. I started out being a prosecutor for the city prosecutor's office in Canton. So they prosecute just the misdemeanor offenses. So I got my feet wet there for a couple of years, and then I went over to the county prosecutor's office where they do the bigger stuff. Everything from, felony thefts up to murder, rape, all kinds of things like that. I was prosecuting that for a couple of years. After I did that, I went over to the civil division of the prosecutor's office, which is where they represent county government offices, basically, when they get sued or they have legal problems. So it's a completely different part of the prosecutor's office that really a lot of people don't hear too much about. But they had an opening in the civil division, so I went over there and did that for a couple of years. Then I went to the Stark County Stark County Sheriff's Office, and I was his legal advisor for 13 years. During that time, I started a private law practice. So I went part-time at the sheriff's office, and then the rest of my time I spent in my private practice. And Mike and I share an office and have shared an office since, I think, 1999 or 2000, along with some other attorneys as well. So I started doing that and working at the private practice, and then also doing the other piece of it, which was working at the sheriff's office as his legal counsel. I just left there back in October, and now I'm back at the county prosecutor's office again in the civil division. And so I'm doing that, and I'm doing the private practice also. And I just kind of split up my time Monday through Friday between the two offices. So that's been my career so far. Rob and I met in law school, so we're married. And he's had a really interesting career path, so I'll let him go next.
It's not really that interesting, but they tell me you're the best of the Canton City Schools. Is that true?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
All right. Everybody's going to either doing this in order to get a leg up on competition and your future education. I'm assuming that's for the purpose of when you get out of school, you're already going to be ahead of the pack, so to speak, and going into the educational field. Some of you have had, I'm sure, bad times with family or whatever, or you know people that have done that. My parents were both immigrants to the country, and English was the second language in my household when I grew up, and it was tough for me going through the public schools as I went through. My parents were very poor. I went to San Diego State University as a young man, then I went to the University of Akron only because it was the cheapest law school I could get into at the time I could afford. Not because I couldn't go anywhere else, but that was the only thing I could get into. However, everything has paid off for me, both my education. I worked hard when I was a young man. I worked hard when I went to college. I paid for my way. That is probably the most difficult thing these days, is being able to pay for college. And it's ridiculous that we're spending $3,000 a day or $3,000 a month on a prisoner in prison, but we can't afford to pay for college education. I mean, how much more would college education serve our community and the productiveness of our society is if we would shorten some of these prison terms, get some of these people out of prison, spend that money on kids like you that we could really get productivity out of. And I think that this program is the community's kind of getting together and doing a good thing. You guys recognize the advantage of this, and it's an honor to be here today. After law school, I went and worked at the prosecutor's office in Mahoney County. I was a violent crimes prosecutor. And then I worked 12 years with the Drug Task Force, which was made up of the FBI, the DEA. And we had kind of our own unit. We went after interstate drug trafficking. We forfeited millions of dollars in drug cash. We put a lot of people away. We helped a lot of people along the way. We weren't just out to get people. We were also out to people that were on heroin, people that were on prescription pills. We were able to recognize it. Even doctors, physicians, pharmacists, and nurses, we recognized that everybody had problems, and we try to help those people get into programs and rehabilitate their lives. We tried to save the people we could, and the people we couldn't, obviously, they ended up going to prison. After that 12-year run, I went into private practice. The law director in Louisville part-time because of PERS and everything else that goes along with pensions in the public sector. Once you get that far, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But after that, I went into private practice. We have an office in Boardman, and we have an office in Canton with Mike. And I do a lot of criminal litigation outside of Stark County because we do have some government conflicts. But I do have, I've done everything from top to bottom, death penalty to federal litigation. We've done everything. And at this point, if I called it a career, I think I'd be happy with myself. How many of you are considering, or right now, it's hard to say, but how many of you would want to be a lawyer at this point, knowing what you know now? Okay, a couple of you. That's a good sign, because we do have a lot of lawyers, and this is a situation where there's a lot of competition. Technology has changed the game. So we're going to get into this now, and go on to the next slide here. And to protect the public from the government, protect the public from insurance companies, protect the public from entities that would take your rights, that would take advantage of you, that would sell you a warranty that isn't valid, to sell you a bad car. Lawyers are here to protect you and the public as well, and that is a major role. It's a major role that's overlooked. A lot of times you hear, the lawyers are doing this, the lawyers are bad, the lawyers are doing this, the lawyers are doing that. Well, you got to see who's saying that, because lawyers represent people, and those people are people that are everywhere. And those people have rights, and we are protecting the rights of those people. And if the people's rights are not protected, if people's warranties are not protected, if people's contracts are not protected, what will be happening to all the people? Eventually, you're going to have a society that the people are under the control of the government, corporations, and that's one thing we're trying to prevent, and that's what we try to do, is to protect the public. So, I don't know if Mike, do you have any comments on the other issues?
No, those are good. Why don't we go on to the, if you have a slide there on, let's look at the education that's involved. And we could talk about that a little bit, some of the background.
What we were saying earlier too is that since probably the late 50s, or even before that, the law really hasn't changed that much. And you can see this is a,
Yeah.
oh, the sound's not that great though.
This was made the other day, this program.
State-of-the-art sound.
State-of-the-art technology.
Do we have any sound for this?
This speaker's working.
This is locked down, I think.
I'm unlocking.
I think it's
We're gonna need it. So you can see though, in 1957, when this was done, that it really hasn't changed all that much from what's happening today. In our courtrooms every day, across the county, across the state, this is pretty much what it's going to look like. Okay, your defense lawyer, your prosecutor, and your judge, and you have a courtroom, and you have a few electronics these days, much like this one. But
Okay, thank you. Is that the way the sound's going to be?
got to read an account to look at, But if you're already an accountant, you already have a heads up on everybody else and be able to go through all of that. And finance is definitely there. Corporate law, though, deals with a lot of different areas. You're going to have, like you dealt with was human resources. You got an issue Human Resources probably drew up the contract so they can head off any problems. Vivi does a lot of that, law. You got people that are issuing shares in corporations, financing for corporations, for bonds, shares. That's also a corporate area. Then you have in-house corporate structure, not only with personnel, but you're going to have in-house corporate with product delivery, the patent stuff, all the intellectual property stuff. So there's a lot of different areas within corporate that make up corporate law.
Yeah, I think finance is a good major, or accounting, if you're interested in that, if you're interested in the business, working in the business world.
Yeah, agreed. Did you say you're interested in international? A foreign language is good. I don't know if are you taking a foreign language? I mean, having a second language is excellent to have.
Not right now, but I was gonna, I was looking at German or something, close to that in college.
Anything. I mean, anything that you can actually master that language would probably be very beneficial.
And that, a dual degree like a foreign language and international law would really be valuable in an undergrad for you. And then, going to law school on top of that major, I think would open up a lot of doors.
Do you want to go back, before we get into the money scheme here, let's
Go back to your previous
so, how about the law school? Well, no, we sort of covered undergrad. Now, we thought maybe we'd make a few comments on getting into law school. Does that look like
Go ahead.
follow in line?
Yeah, that's in there.
Now, Rob, what did you have down there as far as popular or competitive undergraduate school? What can you comment on what you got into?
Well, I mean, definitely to get into you want to get into the best law school that you can, because that's, most companies, law firms that are hiring are going to hire the top 10% of any law school class. And if you go to Yale, Harvard, Berkeley, any of these top-notch schools, you're going into an area where you're already in a big market because you're in Boston, you're in a major city, San Francisco, Chicago's got Northwestern. If you get in the top 10%, I mean, you're guaranteed basically a high-paying job right out of law school. You're already going to have massive debt if you didn't have scholarships going into it. So that's something to consider. If you go to an undergraduate school that nobody necessarily knows about or has heard of, it's going to be harder to get into one of those top-tier law schools, even if your grades are decent. So you're going to need good grades in undergraduate, definitely a competitive undergraduate school, and then go from there. Now, you're not going to see, I'm not putting down the University of Akron or anything, but if you go to the University of Akron undergraduate, you're not going to see too many of those students make it into Harvard or Yale or whatever, because when they look at that, you may get one outstanding student from there that they say meets all the requirements, did all the testing and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be rare that you get a university or a Kent State or something like that, but you're going to see people from Yale, Harvard, Princeton, wherever, getting into those classes at a larger number because they already know what they're getting with those students at those schools. So it's somewhat, you have a leg up, and that's unfortunate reality is that you just can't go to wherever you want and think you're going to go somewhere else. Even if you go look at the Ohio State admissions, University of Akron or Kent State, there's 3 or 4 maybe per class, where you're not going to see that, you're going to see a lot of people from Ohio State. You're going to see a lot of people from major schools going to these schools. So it is a reality of life that, where you go to school is going to make a difference, and where you finish in your school, what major you take, are all going to make differences. You should know that now before you go out there and think you're going to be able to do something when you can't do it. So the reality is to try and get into the best undergraduate school that you can, try and do the best you can, and try and finish the top of your class. That's what you should try and do if that's what you want to do. That doesn't mean you can't make it at going to the University of Akron Law School, because I did. She did, and we're all, we're doing fine. But if you want to make the big bucks right away, I mean, you're going to have to go to the top-notch school, and you're going to have to be in the top 10%, or you're going to have to be in the top 10% at like Cleveland State or Case Western or one of those other schools where you're in a major city.
And on law school admission, we would look at, of course, your class rank, your grade point average is very important. We are talking about the law school admissions test. Boy, it's been a long time since I've taken that. Maybe you two are a little more.
Well, when we took it, there were 3 parts to it. There was a reading comprehension and what are the other two parts called? A lot of analogies. So this is to this as this is to this. That's like a simplified version of it, but they're a lot more complicated on the test. And then what was the third section? I can't
They
remember.
have like logic games.
Was that what it was?
Like logic games.
Logic.
Logic, yeah, that's always good.
So reading, you know, really important. You do a lot of reading as a lawyer, and they want to know that you're going to be able to handle that. And you have to be able to read and understand what you read. Also, writing skills, very important. Those are two of the main things we do every day as lawyers, is we read a lot of stuff, and we write a lot of stuff. And we have to write our briefs and our motions and things to the court in a way that is understandable and comprehensive. And so reading and writing skills are highly tested on the LSAT. And your ability to think in logical sequences is also highly tested. Would you agree?
100%. I think, I look back even for myself, and I couldn't, you know, I did pretty well in undergrad, but when I got to law school and the amount of reading I had to do that first year, I was like, you know, it was like almost, I couldn't believe it. It was constant, morning to night, that's all I was doing. And then trying to understand everything you're reading, I have to go back 2-3 times and read stuff usually for me to get it, but it was just a lot of work.
And
but-
sometimes these cases that you're reading in law school are old, obscure, and not that interesting. But, you know, you gotta read, comprehend, and the way that they did it when we were in law school is they operate on a Socratic method, which means that the teacher is up there and she'll say, okay, Smith v. Jones case, Ms. Whalen, tell us about that. And then, you know, she'll keep firing questions at you. So you have to be on the ball. You don't sit there as a sponge and just absorb. The teachers are constantly, the professors are constantly testing you to see if you read your material, see if you understand your material, and see if you can go beyond reading and understanding and applying it in some kind of different setting. So they'll kind of manipulate the facts a little bit and say, well, what if this fact had changed? Would that change your opinion in any way? So that's how law school is. It's more interactive, and you're more on the spot. Then at least that's a big change from college that I found, and from high school even. I mean, I went to Ohio State for undergrad, so there were so many people. There just wasn't that personalized interaction, but definitely in law school it's more like that.
And that's how you would describe what's called the Socratic method.
Right.
Rob, how would you describe, is that what you would say? What is the Socratic method? For a lot of us probably don't, a lot of us don't understand that, but.
I think it goes back to ancient Greece when Socrates would teach his students on a one-on-one basis. He would present questions and then counter questions, and then that's how you would learn. And that's the earliest form of learning from a high standard, and that's how most law schools, competitive law schools, do it. A lot of the touchy-feely law schools, like University of San Diego or whatever, they don't want to offend anybody, so they just teach you directly, lecture, and then that's it. You go home and take it. But at Akron, you know, they expect 10% of the students at the first year to fail out, and they're tough, and it's hard to get through your first year. They really grill you, and it's just a means to make sure that they get a high bar passage at the end, because that's what their statistics are based on. So they're looking to flush out 10% of the students right off the bat, and that's, I mean, I think that's pretty consistent with, you know, those, you know, the mid-range schools. I mean, that's a tough part. So if you get into Harvard or Yale, you're going to get through it. So that's the one thing you should look forward to. If you get into those schools, they will make sure you get through it.
Yeah, it's just the getting in part. But if you're not at that level and you're getting into pretty much the other 90% of the schools, you know, you're going to have to prove yourself to stay.
And that first year, go ahead, Ann.
I think there's a big difference between high school extracurriculars and college extracurricular activities. Could you speak to some good college extracurriculars, like professional societies, kind of advise them on that? What a good college extracurricular would be, like, you know, obviously these kids here are involved in our group, which is a more professional
You
based
mean
group.
it's something a law school would look at as
Yeah,
an
and something they would
extracurricular
value,
activity,
yeah.
and they would consider that maybe in the application process? That's a good question. I can't, other than to see that you're active, I think is important. That you know, you've got good grades, your LSAT score is good, but yet look at the other things you're involved in. You know, and I'm not sure I can pinpoint one as being better than another. I don't know what you two think about that, but I think as long as you're doing something constructive, if you've got a part-time job to help yourself get through, I think law school admissions would look at something like that. You know, Is that, I mean, did you two have any, before we take your question, let me just see if you have any other comments on what you may feel would be a better activity, one way or the other, if you were in undergrad?
The ones I did, I had like internships at like the public defender's office or the federal public defender's office.
Oh, yeah, this is an undergrad.
Right,
Yeah, you did.
an
Oh, you did,
undergrad.
okay.
So one thing is that I kind of saw the public service that I was involved in. I think the law school saw that I was involved with public service and that I was interested not only in myself, but in helping the public. And I think that they took that into consideration, looking at my character. So anything that helps develop and allows someone else to see a good character in you, and that you're helping somebody else. Like Habitat for Humanity, I mean, our nephew did that, you know, building houses in inner cities. I mean, I think that's a good thing that tells somebody else that you're a good person.
I would also add possibly like a student government association. When I was in college, we had a student senate, you know, something like that where you'd
Right,
be
yeah,
involved
that'd be
with,
good.
you know, organizations and, you know, debating back and forth, things
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
good, Ron, thank you.
And anything that you could do in the law as a high schooler, whether it be secretarial work or a runner for some of these bigger law firms where they send you on an assignment, you know, go to Portage County and file this paperwork or go serve this, you know, something that a high schooler could do, typing work, something like that, anything like that that exposes you to the legal profession is definitely a heads up, whether it be in high school or college or both.
Yeah, great.
I personally, I've gotten a feel from personal research that Model United Nations, which is available at a high school level, also available at a college level, is a really potent extracurricular for law schools. It's a mock version of the United Nations. It really exposes you to international conflicts and mock scenarios. That's something.
Or speech classes, or
Oh,
speech
yeah.
societies, yeah, those would be good. Like a
Speech classes,
Toastmaster,
yes.
if they had anything like that on a younger level, would be good.
Debate teams.
Yeah, debate teams.
Speech, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those are all good areas. Key is, get yourself involved as much as you can.
All right.
Okay, where are we now? We're in law school now?
Yeah, this is
You're
the,
after law school.
this is after law school. This kind of ties back into the majors though. You can see the
Okay.
intellectual property, patent law. That's the hot stuff right now because, you know, with the internet, with apps, with the advancement of all this technology going on, there's, you know, 1,000 different patents flying. There's different patent systems around the world. There are disputes over all of that. So that's a hot area, big money, a lot of demand. And then the other stuff, the large tort cases, is very difficult to get into. You see that on TV. Like right now, I don't know how many of you have at least watched the commercials. I think one of the lawyers is running on General Motors right now. How many of you have heard about General Motors and the problems they have? Okay. So that's already becoming a large tort civil action. And the lawyers at the top end of that are going to make millions of dollars just on that one case. Because you got a lot of people involved, you got a lot of cases that are, people have died, you know, have been hurt, and GM has covered this up. So that is one of the, and that's a rare situation. So yeah, there's a lot of money involved in that, but it's few and far between, and you have to have a lot of overhead to do those types of cases. Then you kind of move down, you'll see that you know, you get into where we do a lot of work, it's regular civil litigation, insurance. We were all government lawyers at one time, and now you know, I do criminal defense, so that's sort of at the bottom. And then you get down to the public service section, where you're not going to make a lot of money, but you are going to get a lot of satisfaction. I mean, helping people stay in their homes, you know, taking cases where no one else is going to take it as a public defender. I mean, no one else is going to defend, you know, child pornographer or whatever. I mean, it's a thankless job, and society's going to look at you like you're bad. But the Constitution doesn't work without guys that are down at the bottom defending people charged with criminal activity, even no matter how bad it is. Because if you only have one side, if the government's in control, the society will eventually fall apart. So those guys are really the unsung heroes. They're making sure that that person is protected, those rights in the Constitution are protected, and that that person has a fair trial, and that that person receives everything that, you know, that he will feel that is a fair trial, that everything is processed fairly for him. So those public sector jobs, yeah, they don't make a lot of money, but those are the jobs that are probably the highest satisfaction, because you're doing something that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily do, and you're kind of giving up of yourself. in doing those jobs. So from top to bottom, we just kind of ran a Zagat survey of where the money is. I think that's important for you to know if you want to go into law, that you should know that now, because I certainly made that mistake, and not knowing exactly, you know, what paid and what didn't pay.
But you love what you're doing.
No, I don't. No, I do. I do.
You, I know you. And I guess we're talking about, let's go back and talk about what happens right after law school. I mean, I guess you know that everybody to be licensed has to pass a bar exam. You know, once you get through law school, you get a degree, it's called a JD or Juris Doctorate. That's the technical word for it. That's your degree from law school. And then whatever state that you want to, if you want to practice law, you don't have to go into private practice. I mean, there's other options. Even with a law degree, a lot of some great teachers. Some of my best professors, basically, they were attracted to teaching. They were very intellectual, very smart, very bright lawyers, but they wanted to teach. They wanted to share that. So they didn't necessarily have to, I don't think they have to take a bar exam to be a teacher, do you? In a law school, I don't think so, because you're not practicing law.
Right.
You know, so you take the bar exam. Ohio has a bar exam. And I don't know what the recent passing rate is, but it's it's usually like a 3-day exam. At least it was when I took it. I took the bar exam in Ohio, and I took a bar exam in Florida because I had, 30 years ago, I had a hunch that I may be moving to Florida, but I never did, but I took the bar exam. I had to go to Florida and spend 3 days and take a bar exam. And again, the preparation for that is very stressful because you just say to yourself, I spent all these years getting this degree, and if I don't pass this bar, I mean, you know, is it a waste of money or, you know, a waste of time? But so anyway, there's a lot of courses that help you prepare it. Some of you have taken like the SAT. I'm sure they've had course preparations that you can take to prepare, and it's the same thing with the LSAT. Again, that's how it was about 37 years ago. Is that the way the bar exam is today, would you say, for the most part?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a 3-day exam, at least when we took it. We took and passed, we're licensed in Ohio and state of California. So when we took the Ohio exam, it was right out of law school. So usually graduate in May or June, and then that next bar exam is November. So you have those months in there to study. And we really studied like crazy because your job is usually dependent on it. So if you have found employment as a lawyer and are waiting to take the bar or pass the bar, your job is contingent 99% of the time on you passing that bar exam, because you are not valuable to them if you cannot go into court and take care of cases. So they want to see that you've passed that exam. So I had a job out there, a job offer, but it was contingent on passing the bar. So when I took the California exam, I was already a practicing lawyer in Ohio, and I felt a lot less stressed because I didn't have my whole job hanging in the balance there. Somebody had a question.
I
Yes,
did
great.
actually. After you take the bar, do government agencies and private practices really look at a pass or fail, or a pass by X%? Do they?
I think they look at a pass or fail, to be honest with you. What do you guys
In the
think?
bar exam?
The
As
bar
far as
exam,
how you did on the
I
bar?
don't know if I'm not even sure they know how they were doing. I'm not sure that's public. Do you think it is?
Oh, to the I don't think the employer.
No, I think it's just a pass or
So
fail.
to the employer's knowledge, it is you pass the bar
Right, but
exam.
they don't want to see you had to take it 3 times to pass. That could
Right.
But,
Yeah.
have an effect.
And, you know, I think we were all fortunate to pass the bar exam the first time, and I know some that haven't, and they're fantastic lawyers. It doesn't mean that you're not gonna be a good lawyer. You could have had a bad day, like anything you take in school, you take a test, you had a bad day. So, I mean, you know, you're not trying to say, but I think the passing is what you're looking for. You just want to pass that test.
Yeah, by 1%, that's good enough. Rob, what do you think?
Now, here's a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I know in the medical field, like, certain parts of it is like continuing education, meaning you have to go and retake classes sometime and, like, retake a test or something. Is that the same in the law field, like, relearning new laws that come out, or, like?
We have to take continuing education as lawyers.
Okay.
Every 2 years, we have to file paperwork with the Ohio Supreme Court showing that we have taken X number of hours of continuing education, and they even dictate what fields and what areas you have to take it in.
Okay.
So we have to take substance abuse. You're probably wondering what that has to do with being a lawyer, but unfortunately, substance abuse is problematic among lawyers, and so they want lawyers to be educated in recognizing the signs and symptoms of substance abuse in their colleagues or clients of theirs and so on. So we have to take a half hour of that. We have to take an hour of professionalism and I think an hour of ethics. And then from there, the rest of our hours could be in other fields or our fields of interest or our fields of specialty.
What are those offered through? Is that through a private university?
All different. They have companies that just run these schools. The bar associations of the different states have seminars. So there's never a shortage of places to go to get your credit hours.
And you're paying for those?
Yes.
As well?
Unless, if you're with a law firm or a government employer, they may pay your way for those. If you're in private practice, then yeah, you pay.
And really, that 24-hour requirement, that really just came about, I mean, probably within, maybe about 10, 15 years ago. When I first started practicing law, we never had to take that many hours of continuing education. But the Supreme Court, they basically saw there's a lot of lawyers doing sloppy things, there's a lot of lawyers mismanaging people's money, and they really have honed crackdown on lawyers. It's really amazing what I've seen over the last several years on how strict the rules are on how we manage our practices, how we manage our money, our clients' money. And one little mistake can cost us, one extreme is disbarment, the other extreme is some type of public reprimand, but we have to stay on top of it. And I know Vivian mentioned substance abuse, drugs, drinking, and that is really, I was just reading an article this week in our bar exam. Did you get the bar journal?
Mm-hmm.
It talked about the percentage of lawyers who are battling with this problem. And I know you're young, stay on the straight and narrow, that's the best thing you can do.
It's a stressful job,
it's
so
a
I think it
stressful
lends
job.
itself to people trying to relieve stress and in the wrong ways
Yeah,
sometimes.
I agree. I agree.
Because a lot is hanging on the line in everything you do, no matter what kind of law you practice. It could be a criminal case where somebody's future fate is in your hands. Could be a civil case where somebody's come to you because they're injured, and you're trying to get fair compensation for them, or you're defending a company that's been sued that could cost them to go out of business if they lose. There's lots of big stakes.
I think Gallup, an independent stats manager, came out with the statistic that something over 50% of lawyers fresh out of law school come out with some kind of depression or therapy needed because it's just so stressful.
Yeah, I would believe it.
I would probably right there.
Any of you guys anyone in here that wants to be either an FBI agent, DEA agent, anybody consider that? Anyone?
Consider.
Nobody?
Okay.
Back here.
The principal of the school.
You'd be surprised that 50% of FBI agents or IRS agents are either accountants or lawyers. So there's a lot of knowledge in that job there. So that's why that job, if you're considering that, a law school degree is not a bad option, even if you get in and you're able to do it after the fact. And sometimes they'll send you to school to do it, and that's a way to pay for school, is to get into a government job like that where they'll say, oh, we'll pay you to go to law school, we'll pay you to become an accountant. So that's an option too. But every job in the FBI or IRS or DEA, all of them require a 4-year college education in order to get there. It doesn't matter necessarily what major you're in, but they all require a 4-year college education. And some of them, in certain circumstances, will help pay for education after the fact. The other job we indicated there, a lot of, and what you discussed earlier, Eric, is that the alternative dispute resolution systems. We have arbitration, mediation now, which we keep the courts out of it. And businesses have determined that that's a lot cheaper and it's a lot to their advantage when they can have an arbitrator or a mediator decide a case rather than having to go through litigation and have actual jurors decide, because jurors are the last bastion of the regular people controlling the government. And the more they want to take the cases out of jurors' hands, the better it is for business, and that's why they have arbitration, mediation, even in labor and other things. But that's what also requires a law degree and some experience to be an arbitrator or a mediator. And a mediator is more of a person that tries to conciliate the two sides and come to an agreement, and they kind of mediate in between, and so that the parties reach an agreement, but also require being able to practice law.
Why don't you talk a little bit about risk management and insurance? How would you define that, Rob?
Well, in the risk management of our insurance, you're trying to reduce liability either by reducing potential injury, potential loss of product, potential whatever it is. You're trying to minimize for your client what risk is involved, whether it's litigation, whether it's injury, whatever it is. That's what risk management is. You want to reduce the risk for your client. So you're involved in whether there's litigation available to somebody else, or if there's some other issue that may cause your client to be in a position where they're going to lose a lot of money. Anybody, let's see what movie was just, not The Wolf of Wall Street, but there was another Wall Street movie that just came out about Lehman Brothers, and about how that they were so invested in mortgages in the U.S. and on this bubble in 2007 and 8, that they had so much money invested in all of these bad mortgages. They were way too leveraged on these mortgages, and it caused Lehman Brothers, a company that's been around forever, to go out of business because all of a sudden the land wasn't worth anything anymore, and all their investments weren't worth anything anymore. They had way too much risk on one side because they didn't take proper risk management and have it leveraged on both sides so that they would make money on both sides, kind of like a bookie. A bookie makes money, he's going to make money whether the game wins or loses because he's got risk balanced on both sides. And Lehman Brothers didn't have that because they didn't have good risk management because they were making so much money on this paper mortgage that they were running, the scheme and derivatives that they're running. They ignored this risk management, and that's kind of where you would go as a lawyer, because you can recognize what is a risky move and advise your client to that effect.
In insurance, you could have insurance adjusters, people that adjust insurance claims. Some of them are lawyers. Some lawyers work for insurance companies. They're not necessarily in the courtroom trying the cases or defending the cases, but they may be behind the scenes working in-house for the insurance company and trying to make settlement discussions and so on, settlement decisions.
Good.
In-house counsel, Rob, maybe we should touch on that.
Go ahead.
Just, these are broken down into law degree required and law degree helpful. Just to get back up to the requirements, obviously the judges, the mediators, arbitrators, magistrates are lawyers that work for judges. Sometimes they can hear some of the smaller cases. And then law clerks, some of them are lawyers, some of them are in law school, it just depends. In-house counsel are lawyers that work for corporations and advise them on all sorts of corporate activities. Could be anything from labor and employment issues to profit issues, financial issues. There's lawyers in every corporation, all the big corporations anyway, have lawyers working in some capacity there. Sometimes they handle employee issues, like they have unions, and so they represent management side in the union negotiations. Those are usually lawyers, labor lawyers. So they're not out there practicing and getting clients and getting cases. They're just focusing on their work at the particular corporation or company that is their employer, and that's usually all they do then.
Did you have a question, Ken?
Yeah, with mediator, arbitrator, and law clerk, do they have to pass the bar? Do they have to?
Mediators, yes. Well, they're usually yes, because they're working in conjunction with the court. So they have to be, they have to pass the bar. Judges, yes. Arbitrators, there is some labor law arbitrators that are not lawyers, but if you're talking about arbitrating disputes that could be in court, they would all be lawyers. So there is a section of arbitrators that may not be lawyers. They would be the ones that would be, well, when I've encountered them have been they would decide union contracts and so forth, and they may be business people without a law degree. But the context that we're using it here would be an arbitrator in a dispute that would otherwise be in court, or maybe is in court and the sides agree to go to binding arbitration.
Now, the law clerks are, we're speaking about the professional law clerks, and every federal judge and a lot of the state judges, the common police courts, and bankruptcy court judges, they have multiple professional law clerks, and they're all college graduates and lawyers. Whether they pass the bar or not is not necessarily important, because what they're doing is they're advising the court. They're taking a case that the court may assign to them and say, okay, you look at both sides of the briefing that has been filed, do your research, and then come up with a decision. And then the judge will then review the decision with the law clerk. And that relieves the court of doing all of that underlying work of doing all the research on the case, reviewing the briefs on it, where they could get a expedited or a smaller version of what is at issue, what the law is, and then make a decision. So the law clerk removes a lot of that heavy lifting by the court, so because they have so many cases, so that that they can then make an easier decision with the information that they have.
How do you bring in oversight to prevent law clerks from making mistakes that judges could need that could shift a case either way?
How do you
bring in oversight, like someone to make sure that law clerks are doing what they're supposed to do?
What they'll do generally is they'll have more than one law clerk. They'll say, okay, they'll have a senior law clerk, and then they'll have a lesser law clerk, and then they will both review each other's work. So you're going to have levels of review. If you only have one law clerk, generally the judge then is responsible to make sure that law clerk is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Any question?
Speaking about judges, could you elaborate a little as to the career path people usually take to become a judge?
That's a good question too.
That's a good question.
What's your last name?
Miller.
That's a good name to run, to be a judge.
Well, they have to be lawyers, they have to have been lawyers for X number of years. What is it, 5 years for a common pleas court judge?
Yeah.
They want to expand that to 10, but I think it is 5.
Yeah, they have to have political aspirations, at least in the state court system. So we have two different systems. We have the federal court system where judges get appointed for life, and they don't have to run for re-election. However, they usually started out by having some sort of political aspirations, or they wouldn't have been selected by the president in the first place. And then you have the state court system, where in Ohio, our judges are elected. So they run for election. And the requirements there are law degree, practicing for X number of years, have finances to fund a campaign, have political aspirations, know a lot of people. What else?
You're hitting on all the important subjects.
I mean, this is just the reality of it.
It's the reality, yeah.
Is that their past career experience may or may not be that significant.
Yeah, it becomes more of a political.
It is more of a political. And that's a good question, because
Yeah,
all
that's
these
a great
careers
question.
we're talking about, you know, that's one thing we really haven't done is politics. I mean, there's a lot of people with law degrees that just go into politics. They want to serve the public that way, you know, whether it's a local position, whether it's a state or federal. I would say maybe a majority of our politicians probably have a legal degree.
Yeah, a lot of people, well, some people in the legislature have a degree,
Yeah.
there's a few of them, and
Yeah.
of course all the.
But
all the
it's a
judges.
different breed. I mean, it's really, you get into a different arena there. You're talking about, like Vivian says, I mean, then it becomes sort of like raising money, and it becomes, you know,
Having fundraisers.
fundraisers and having great advisors, and it's totally different.
Depends less on law and more on code.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it's a hugely important job, so.
Absolutely. We need great politics. We
yeah.
need people in government that really are good. They're good people, smart, you know, so. There's too much politics sometimes in politics.
Yeah, there is.
Where are we here?
All right, we're going on to careers that are related in law. And we talked a little bit about law enforcement, the FBI, but there's a whole other realm of agents that are involved. And the state has their own private agent, or have their own agents, and it's called the Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation. And it's they also have crime labs. They have people that go to crime scenes. They have people that then take evidence at the crime scene. They process it. They process DNA. You see all that kind of stuff on the TV shows, the SVU and whatever else they got. What is it? Criminal Investigation Las Vegas, what is that?
CSI.
Yeah, and then everybody watches those shows, and that's a very popular thing to do these days. A lot of kids are going into that because they see this, you know, the back end of that, where you're obtaining the evidence, you're then processing it, you're taking it to a laboratory, you're running it through labs, you're running it through spectrometers, you're then using you know, a lot of different science in order to come up with a conclusion based on the tests that you're running. And that's all through law enforcement investigation. The state has it. Stark County has their own crime lab.
You need a science degree for that. So that's getting back to, not a law degree, but it's really, you'll work with lawyers.
Right, and that goes to, you know, you have to have a science background, but they train a lot of, they have their own schools and educational system, and they have to train them. They have people that you work under another scientist while you're doing that. It's actually a great job to get into because it's not really that stressful. You're still involved in the law enforcement aspect of it. You end up having to testify in court occasionally on what tests are run or what you did at the crime scene, whatever it is. But it's really a good job, nice job. It is very popular right now. Then you have the other law enforcement aspects. You got police departments everywhere these days. You have them at every college and university has a police department of their own, which end up usually paying better than your local Akron PD or Canton PD. You have all sorts of other law enforcement opportunities as far as corrections, prisons, where they need officers for that. They have their own investigators in prison. They have a lot of different things that go along with prison enforcement, because there's a lot of crime that goes on in prison. I mean, they have more drugs in prison these days than they do on the streets. So everybody has their own law enforcement. So there's a lot of areas that are related to law that have law enforcement. All those jobs pay pretty well, and they're all something to consider that are not just being a lawyer or involved with a law degree. The big thing right now that everybody's going into is this metadata. Everybody hear about that, and about stuff going on with computers and so forth. Now, e-discovery is a big thing. It's electronic discovery. What happens is that we don't store our stuff on paper anymore. We have all cloud computing in our law firm. We have cloud computing in businesses that's cloud. They have servers and so forth. So they have people that are trained to be able to go in and use certain search parameters to find out whatever documents or emails or whatever they're looking for that may affect a big or major civil case. So that e-discovery, right now, there's a lot of courts are clashing over how far anybody can go into getting electronic information, what parameters can be used in searching electronic information, what third parties, you know, you may get an email from Ford Motors. Is that email then subject to discovery by a law firm that has an unrelated case, even though you got the email or you sent the email? What are you subject to in that realm of subpoena or e-discovery? So all of that is being, right now, is at the forefront of our practice and making everything very confusing. But that is a big area where people are just being trained in how to do that. So that's another big area that's going on right now. Then you have like accident reconstructionists. I have a case right now where a guy died in a car accident, and they try and reconstruct the accident to see how fast people were going, which person was turning, were they using a cell phone, they try and connect the cell towers, were they texting at the time of this accident, what were the condition of the tires, the brakes, the mechanics of the car. All of that goes into to determine how this accident occurred. So there's people that just do that, and it's all mostly mathematics. You take certain variables, and then you figure out different coefficients and so forth. So again, science background. Financial evaluations on accounting, forensic accounting, that kind of thing. And then you get down to the, the court reporters, paralegals, appraisers, and then to the bottom, which I talked about, was corrections, prison, probation, pretrial services. Those are people that before trial are being handled with bail and so forth, and what bail can be given, and how safe are they. Make sure they're going to show up for court.
Right, when you use the word forensic, what does that mean?
Forensic is like a scientific evaluation of a particular issue. So you're tearing something apart, and then you're analyzing all of the pieces and to see how those pieces play in the whole. Anybody got anything?
Paralegals are very in demand right now, especially some of the larger law firms. Four-year degree is helpful, and there's a paralegal school. I'm not sure all the training that is required for paralegal. Do you know?
I think, I'm not, it may be a year or 2-year program.
So they do a lot of what law firms were using first-year lawyers to do. They could do some very limited legal research, some writing on a smaller level, and those tend to pay pretty well also, especially if you're good at it.
I think the future, when you guys get out, there will be no more secretaries, there will be no more assistants, because everything, we're so close to voice recognition now being at 100%, that you can see this already. The big law firms in New York and California, all of their secretaries and legal assistants, they fired them all. But paralegals are a good deal because, and it's not necessarily the greatest career, because you can't really move up to top. I mean, you're going to come in at a certain rate, and you're going to end up at a certain rate. You're just never going to make the big money. But law firms are using them because they can replace lawyers with them, and they can replace the secretaries with them. So they're getting a person at less cost that can reduce the lawyers that are making 6 figures, and then they're getting rid of the secretaries and the support staff because they have voice recognition that can go into this transcription. So they were out of vogue for a while, but now they're coming back in vogue. I don't know what necessarily the short-term future is, but that is an area that is right now kind of in the forefront too.
Well, question, Debbie?
How difficult or how competitive is it once you've graduated from law school to actually to get a position?
I think, my opinion is, a lot of it's the science of that particular time, what the economy is like. I think when I came out, it wasn't bad. It was pretty easy to get. This was in the late 70s, and then you had boom times, the 80s, 90s. I think now, from what I understand, this could be one of the roughest times. I don't know what the percentage is.
Well, I think by the time you guys get out of law school, that you're going to be on a good swing, because guys my age are sucking up the job market. They're not retiring. And they're the baby boomers. Once those guys are out of the workforce, 50% of the lawyers are going to be out of the workforce. Once
I'm working another 20 years.
So, like people like,
the baby boomers.
like Vivian and myself, we're like, please, baby boomers, just retire so that we can now reap the benefits of having decent amounts of money coming in. But I think once the baby boomers are gone, there's going to be a bubble, because law schools are expensive. Nobody wants to go right now. They're very on the downward swing. They're closing some of them. So I think if you get into a good law school, you're in the top 10% of your class. By the time you guys get in and get through it, they're going to be in demand again, and you're going to have, I think, a good career. And I think it's because the baby boomers are really hurting us, and I think it's in a lot of professions. So once they get out of the system, I think the economy will pick up.
That's a good point too, Rob. My son is contemplating going to law school. He's a senior, and I've been looking at some statistics, and actually the law schools, there's less law school admission tests taken today than there've been in a long time. It's sort of been a downtrend. So it's like anything else, supply and demand. So this probably could be a good time, because you're catching it on the low side, and then maybe there'll be more of a demand in 3-4 years. But the other thought I had along that is the law basically evolves. It's always changing. There's always new areas. For example, I'm thinking of oil and gas. 10 years ago, nobody thought of a career in law that would be related to oil and gas. Now it's booming. There's oil and gas lawyers needed everywhere, especially, I shouldn't say everywhere, but in Ohio, with all this drilling going on. Right. Technology, as Rob and Vivian said, technology, it's an unbelievable field for law. But again, you need that specialized education. Intellectual, environmental law, that's a big area. So there's always new areas opening depending on what's happening.
I think it's critical, if you are in law school and looking at your future job prospects, to get in with a law firm or do an internship or get to know lawyers. You're not doing it for the money there, you're doing it for the experience. And you need to bridge that law school education with some legal experience while you're in law school. Because that is what led to me getting my first job, as I was an intern at Canton prosecutor's office, making next to nothing. And so I'd go to law school, and then I'd drive down here and I'd do my internship. And I got to do some little traffic, cases, speeding tickets and so forth. With an intern certificate, you could do that. And that was where my first job was. So when a lawyer left there, and I just happened to be getting ready to pass the bar, they had an opening and they're hiring from within. They're looking at their interns or their law clerks. So any opportunities you have in the legal field, I mean, I really don't care if you answer the phones or you're serving subpoenas. Anything that you can do to get to know lawyers while you're in law school will benefit you in getting a job in the long run. Because not only your grades that they're gonna look at, it's who do you know? You know, that's how it is in every career, and law is no different.
Good point.
The only other thing I was going to add to that was earlier you mentioned where you choose to go for your undergraduate degree and then where you then pursue law school. Certain states are more saturated than others in the field, so I know like Michigan has Cooley Law, which is almost like a chain, like almost like a fast food law school. There's like 12 different branches of it. Well, in Michigan right now, there's 5 attorneys for every job in the legal field. Yeah, so it's also dependent on the state that you want to practice in. So where you choose to take your bar exam should, you know, like the activity that we had for you today, you need to look at where the jobs are most in demand.
And I would suggest going to law school, where do you want to practice ideally?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Now, law schools and their education are coming under fire right now. And I think goes to your point, Andrea, is that I think in the next 5 to 10 years, in California, the existence of your law school depends on your passage of the bar, your bar exam passage. So if you're below 50% for 3 years or whatever, your law school is getting shut down. So you're no longer going to be accredited. So I think states are going to this to reduce the number of lawyers, to reduce the law schools. They are going to start having accountability for these schools. Because there are schools in California that are so easy to get into, but only 1 in 50 of the people ever pass the bar. So you're wasting all this time and money going to law school where you have no chance of ever actually practicing law. And I think that those things are going to become less. I think you're probably not going to have to worry about that because things are going to be tighter once you get to that point. And I think it's already moving in that direction.
I know you want this complete by 3:30, right?
You guys are doing fine.
I know that we talked, what else do we have?
No, this is it, but we're going to go to that right now if you want to do it.
Yeah, the one thing I want to make sure that people understand, and when you get into private practice, and I know some of you mentioned that there's so many different areas of the law, and we try to break them down into criminal and civil. And Rob is a criminal specialist, and I'd say Vivian and I are more civil specialists. Rob's tried cases in federal and state courts, but you have different areas, like, you know, Vivian's a specialist in labor and employment. So that's an area. You've got corporate law, you've got family law, estate law, wills, trusts, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of different branches in law. And again, it's something that you like to do. I like to make one point. Everybody thinks that they watch these TV shows and they think, oh, they're going to be a trial lawyer, right? I mean, that's the glamour that, you know, you like to watch and you have that ambition. But that's a very difficult, probably the most stressful area. Vivian and Rob are both excellent trial lawyers. And they've done it, they can tell you what it's like. But even in that, they work day and night, weekends. And it's a very difficult, stressful thing because you want to make your client happy. You want to work for your client the best you can. But even as a trial lawyer, you then have to master different areas, engineering, whatever that case is dealing with. So it's an area a lot of people look at, and I wanted to make that point. Anybody have any other questions? You guys would agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
We have should we go, do we have time to do this?
Definitely.
You want to go ahead and do that?
Yeah, we're going to let you guys be the lawyers for a while. We'll split it down the middle, I guess. We'll have the government on this side and the non-government constitutional protections on this side. And then you guys can discuss amongst yourselves. We'll go through a little thing. This is the 4th Amendment of the United States Constitution, ratified in 1791. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation and particularity describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Any questions on that? All right.
It's one of your greatest concerns at the time. But in the meantime, there's a vivid discussion about the situation with the NSA, not only in America but also in Germany and in Brazil. And President Obama was forced to go public and to justify what the NSA was doing on legal grounds.
What we saw initially in response to the revelations was sort of a circling of the wagons of government around the National Security Agency. Instead of circling around the public and protecting their rights, the political class circled around the security state and protected their rights. What's interesting is, though that was the initial response, since then, we've seen a softening. We've seen the president acknowledge that when he first said, we've drawn the right balance, there are no abuses. We've seen him and his officials admit that there have been abuses. There have been thousands of violations of the National Security Agency and other agencies, authorities, every single year.
Is the speech of Obama recently the beginning of a serious regulation?
It was clear from the president's speech that he wanted to make minor changes to preserve authorities that we don't need. The president created a review board from officials that were personal friends, from national security insiders, former deputy of the CIA, people who had every incentive to be soft on these programs and to see them in the best possible light. But what they found was that these programs have no value. They've never stopped a terrorist attack in the United States, and they have marginal utility at best for other things. The only thing that the Section 215 phone metadata program, actually it's a broader metadata program, a bulk collection means mass surveillance program, was in stopping or detecting $8,500 wire transfer from a cab driver in California. And it's this kind of review where insiders go, we don't need these programs. These programs don't make us safe. They take a tremendous amount of resources to run, and they offer us no value. They go, we can modify these. The National Security Agency operates under the president's executive authority alone. He can end or modify or direct a change in their policies at any time.
For the first time, President Obama did concede that the NSA collects and stores trillions of data.
Every time you pick up the phone, dial a number, write an email, make a purchase, travel on the bus carrying a cell phone, swipe a card somewhere, you leave a trace. And the government has decided that it's a good idea to collect it all, everything, even if you've never been suspected of any crime. Traditionally, the government would identify a suspect. They would go to a judge. They would say, we suspect he's committed this crime. They would get a warrant, and then they would be able to use the totality of their powers in pursuit of the investigation. Nowadays, what we see is they want to apply the totality of their powers in advance, prior to an investigation.
You started this debate. Edward Snowden is in the meantime a household name for the whistleblower in the age of the internet. You were working till last summer.
Obviously, that's Edward Snowden. Everybody here have heard of Edward Snowden?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what we'd like to see is, you can see from the previous thing, the Fourth Amendment as to the warrant requirement. What and how would you interpret the warrant requirement? Or can you come up, the government, with an excuse or an exception to the warrant requirement based on what the government is doing now, which is collecting everybody's information on cell phone, electronic data? Can you come up with an exception of why that should be accepted? And the other people, it should be in that protecting from a Fourth Amendment standpoint. Why would you want, why do you think that this would be unconstitutional in effect, what the government is doing? So what is your best argument for unconstitutionality? And the other side is, why do you think the government should be able to do what it wants to do? We're looking for the best argument as to both sides of this. Fourth Amendment right of every person in the United States. Who wants that one? Okay.
Go, Greg.
Okay.
Oh, we're speaking first?
Hey, go ahead.
I volunteer for opposition to speak first.
No, you can speak first.
Volunteer.
The government always says
So this is the government?
yes.
Okay, so support of the government's position.
In our defense, we believe that the government's first duty is to protect its people. And we see that in a changing society where technology is used as a weaponized system against us and against our people, we feel that it is necessary to increase observation and increase security as to prevent causes before they happen. That is truly the next step in civil defense material, is to stop these laws, identify these potentially threatening scenarios before they ever reach our people. And that's...
Can you do that without violating the Fourth Amendment?
Our Fourth Amendment violation is... Wait, did I just...
You just said violation.
The idea that we are violating the Fourth Amendment is very flexible in its argument. A lot of the information the NSA has collected has been from sources and sites that the ownership of the information is really unknown. When people post what they feel on the internet, is that a matter, is that theirs anymore, or is that something for the public to collect? So it becomes, and then we have an issue of probable cause. As far as phone surveillance, who's to say that something we find on an internet research isn't probable cause to monitor those people? Who's to say that we don't have convicting evidence on anybody we report?
And then I'll add to that. When we were discussing this, we were talking about how when you're driving down the street, just on a highway or anything, you are constantly being monitored by policemen, the sheriff, whatever. As you're driving, I mean, we can see the outside and see what's going on the outside of your car, and then at that point, we'll pull you, you get pulled over, and then from there, we, search the car, whatever needs to be done based on the suspicious activity. And we're going to use that same policy with storing all this information. All this information will be stored, and on the outside, it'll be monitored, but we don't truly go in there and look at everything without probable cause until you give us a reason to look at it.
Do you have any secrets?
Do we have any?
Do you, personally, do you have any secrets?
No. I don't know how to answer.
Yes.
Everybody has
Sure.
something.
Yes.
I mean, would you want the government to know all of your secrets?
No.
Well, but an argument against that is nobody wants their secrets to be known, but it is sometimes in the best interest of the public.
All right, let's hear it from the other side. Who wants to?
Go team.
All right. Well, I guess to start with a quick counter argument, I guess to your analogy of speeding. That information is public, and you can kind of be, you can be prosecuted for breaking laws on public roads, because by driving on public roads, you're subject to the laws of those roads. But the violations we're talking about are when the government collects data on personal transactions and calls, and in your daily life, things that don't involve anything public or involve anything governmental or funded by the government. So every time that they collect a piece of data that's between you and another person or you and a business, it doesn't involve them, they are violating the Fourth Amendment. And I think a lot of times we've brought up teacher reaction and how that it's kind of a loophole to let them do that. So I do think, or we all think, that they should have probable cause and be able to prove it in court before they follow people. And a good solution long-term is to only focus on people, instead of collecting everyone's data, from the big pool of people, is only focus on people who they know have some kind of history or background, instead of just taking from everybody and being able to use that information against them later.
All right, well, let's say you're not doing anything wrong. Why would you care whether the government is following you, knowing exactly where you are based on your cell phone or your computer IP address? Why do you care whether the government is collecting all that data if you're not doing anything wrong?
Yeah, but besides the uneasy feeling of having a big brother watching you, it's really, to be honest, just a waste, first of all, because we waste a lot of money and resources and time collecting and storing information and we'll probably never use about people. And it comes down to a sort of ethical argument about your personal privacy, and that's one of the things that I guess makes America great, is knowing that you'll always be protected by the Constitution, no matter what.
I'd like to add that one of the reasons why it's in the Constitution is because that kind of information can be abused, like, very easily. If anyone were to get access to that information, it could be abused immensely, used for different purposes other than, you know, saying to spot a terrorist. Not to say that it could happen, but it could.
Anybody answer this? Let me ask you this question, since you're going to ask a question. Why was the Constitution written in the first place? What was the purpose of it?
Because people who were redrafting the Constitution out of the Articles of Confederation wanted a large government, and the people were scared that they would control them, so they had the addition of the Bill of Rights added to try to protect themselves against laissez-faire governments.
Right, and that the purpose of the Constitution was not to protect the government and not to protect the government interests, but to protect the people. And it was to protect against the government interfering in the daily lives of people and to protect them from unwarranted interference by the government in your secret lives, in your personal lives. And you always have to remember that the Constitution is there to protect the people and not the government. Today, it's been turned around. The courts constantly use the Constitution to protect what the government's doing, and they put a higher standard on the people. So I think you guys did, both sides did an excellent job on this. That's basically what the government's going to argue is that they need to protect life, which is the most important thing. You can't have liberty without life, and that's what Thomas Jefferson said. But in order, if you live out of fear, then you do not deserve the rights that you have, and that's what Benjamin Franklin said. So we can't live in fear from terrorists and use that as an excuse to destroy our personal lives and our liberty. But at the same time, we have to protect life. So there's both sides of this, and that's what Edward Snowden's about. I don't think he necessarily should be charged as a criminal, but that's what we are right now. And I think that'll weigh out in the future. I think that'll change. But you guys did a good job.
Great job.
Great job, Chad. Nice thought. Good job.
So I don't have to say it's right anymore?
You don't have to say that, no.
Thank you. You just have to argue aside, that's what we do.
All right, great. Well, let's thank our legal team for spending their time with us today. It was a great presentation. And Mrs. Myers is going to introduce you what we want you to do with the last 15 to 20 minutes while you're here.
Okay, we're gonna break down into groups of 4 to 5 people. We're gonna review the assignment that you were given from last month. And so when you're reviewing, within the small groups, when you're reviewing it, come back and say, did anybody have any things that they were not aware of that they became aware of while doing the assignment? Was there any takeaways that you changed your mind on as far as career options? Were there any big surprises? Is there anything that you're going to consider doing differently based on the assignment? What was the biggest key takeaways, and if you're still going to pursue the same career? So you can just break up into 4 groups, and then we'll come back with we'll have one person report out with each group.
Okay, and while this is going on, Summer's going to call groups over for quick picks. Okay, so please don't break her camera. Talking to you.
Ready to go?
Yep, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay, you have the, yes. Anybody that has I need your paper.
Everyone keeps telling me my Israel and not eat psychology. It's not a growing. So you're sleeping, but according to the electoral statistics, by the time you get to school, I'm like, well, you don't. It's more you
She's like, no, actually, I just picture it as the medium pay.
No, that EJ is really coming up. Right down the end. He has a good mind for it. Yeah. Easy. Math, political science.
Anyway, well, one of the three hold on.
Delete it because it was making too much noise.